Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Fatia, and I am the founder and director of the World AfriCultural Community Project. We are a grassroots organization, nonprofit organization based in the Nashville, Tennessee area. We are arts and culture, and the focus of our organization is to participate in a global mission to change the negative narratives about Africa, Africans, and Blackness in general. And the way that we aspire to do that is through the arts, through cultural exchange, through cultural activities such as this one, through arts, culture, education, and creative placemaking. And of creative placemaking includes our current project, a redevelopment project in the North Nashville area, which is in the vicinity of Fisk University and Harvey Medical College. For more information about us, please visit our website at www.world-accp-.org. I am nervous, and please forgive me. I do want to say some thank yous before we get started. I want to thank our board members, the board members of the WACCP, Bruce, Jacqueline, Karen, Chantal, Angela, and Latoya, especially Latoya, who started planning these type of discussions with me a year ago, with our intern, Sophia. So thank you for hanging in there. It took a while to actually get something going. And thank you also to our intern, Julia, who has been very helpful with her administrative support. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your partnership. I have very much enjoyed meeting you and talking with you. You inspire me. Thank you for helping to set this up as far as the format that we're using tonight. Thank you to Niti. I am so happy to finally see you in real time. As I mentioned before, we've been messaging for months. You caught my attention when you posted about one of your experiences with colorism. And, you answered me back and we started communicating, and you were so gracious to say, yes, I want to do something with you. So I really appreciate you. So I am pleased to see everybody here. Again, welcome to everyone on our panel tonight and everyone who's just viewing. Thank you to those who will see this recording. Just have everyone just kind of introduce themselves now. So just quickly, first name, where you grew up, if you want to mention where you live now, and what is your cultural background. And I can start with myself. I'm sure it's not nearly as exciting as the rest of you. So again, I'm Fatia. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, that supposed melting pot of the world, perhaps, or at least of the US, but yet growing up and recognizing how very segregated New York City is. And only through this conversation and just becoming aware of things, I'm realizing, where those little nuggets of colorism were, part of my background and my upbringing as well. I'm raised by parents who were raised in Southern Georgia. So Jim Crow era, post Jim Crow, their experiences and colorism are definitely there as well. Who would like to continue with that, with your introduction?
I can go next. So I'm Niti. I grew up in Australia predominantly, although we spent the first 8 years of my life moving around a lot. I was actually born in Scotland, lived in the UK, in Abu Dhabi, and India for a year before we settled in Australia for good and have been there since. I am the child of first generation immigrants away from India. And so therefore that is my cultural background, being a North Indian cultural background, which has, again, very much influenced my life growing up in Australia. North India in particular has a lot of colorism issues. they're very focused on the fairness of skin. So, you know, you could look at even Bollywood films, and it was very rare up until probably the last 5-10 years, and even so it's still quite rare to see women in particular that were darker. Men, occasionally you would see a few more, but not so many. And so those are the kind of influences that I grew up with. And, you know, whitening creams are big, big, big business in India, and still are, even though they're all remarketed now to not be whitening creams and stuff. So yeah, so I've grown up with that sort of, I guess, you know, cultural clash between living in Australia and the Australian culture here, plus the Indian culture that my parents brought with them. So that's me.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
My name is Tracy. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. So I identify as a Black girl from the South. I'm currently living in Boston, Massachusetts, so in the Northeast of the United States. And when I think about colorism and also think about its impact on sort of me personally, and being a person with lighter skin, it's I think of it in sort of like two ways. One, thinking of it from the standpoint of privileges that I'm afforded because I have lighter skin, right? Things that are told to me, or messages that are told to me because of my lighter skin and that proximity to whiteness, which I think in our conversation we'll get into a bit more. But also having the other side of that of, am I Black enough? You know, and having to really think about like, what is Blackness, and also unpack internalized racism that happens within our community, and the messages that we receive about Blackness and worth and color and having that. And so for me, I'm really excited to talk about this topic, and to have sort of these issues kind of thinking through these issues. And it's interesting, in the other women's circle that I was in last night, we're diving into Sonia Renee Taylor's "The Body Is Not an Apology." So I feel like this is a nice sort of dovetailing into that conversation.
Thank you so much. Lydia, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Actually, I'd also like to invite folks also to put any like website links, any contact information in the chat for everyone, because I'd love to connect if you'd like to share social media links as well. So my name is Lydia. I'm based here in Nashville. I was raised, though, the majority of my life in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a very privileged area outside of Nashville, and a very white area. So it radicalizes you very quickly when all the white kids signal you out and they know. And yeah, and you're spending a good chunk of your time, me, in South Nashville, which is a very diverse area of Nashville, where most of our community members are. So I come from the Coptic community, the Egyptian Christian community, which is a very, very large and significant community here. So to kind of see that difference of how Egyptians live in Nashville, and then how white people 30 minutes away live, shows kind of the real impact of racism, and also of colorism, because then your community has to internalize a lot of that and say, like you were talking about, Tracy, about a lot of the rhetoric I grew up with was, you know, a lot of that privilege that comes with being a light-skinned Egyptian, of being prettier and better than my sister, who's more darker skinned, and my brother also, who's more darker skinned than I am. So a lot of that narrative also trickled down from my parents as well, about how to clean, what is dirty, what is not dirty, and how my parents treated my siblings versus me. So it even had an impact in our home, and being compounded that we are in the United States. I think that compounded severely on that situation as well. So it's been a lot of unlearning. And then I also get comments from people who are not Egyptian that I am not Egyptian because I am light skinned. So having people within your community say you're the best form of our race, and then people outside saying you're not part of that community because really you're not Egyptian. So it just always feels like someone's telling you something about your culture and you're just like oblivious. I'm like, oh, okay, I just don't know who I am, I guess. So it's fun out here. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me, and I run in Mahabba Center in South Nashville, and I will drop the links for the center because this is a big topic that we like to talk about and unlearn in our community as well.
Thank you, thank you. Latoya.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. My name is Latoya Tisdale. I am originally from West Tennessee, a small town in West Tennessee called Whiteville, Tennessee. I went to school at Tennessee State University, so I lived in Nashville for like 20 years, and I currently live in Las Vegas, Nevada. And one of the things that I see when it comes to the thing that I noticed in a lot of the conversations that Fatia and I have had about colorism is like, growing up in the South with light, fair skin, long hair, curly hair, and then myself being dark skin and with short hair. And then that conversation of sometimes feeling like you're not pretty enough, or that you may need to buy some hair in order to look feminine. And even when I went natural, just the whole process at the time when I went natural of buying like bus tickets, airline tickets, and it's saying Mr. Miss on it, or people saying that with my natural hair, it looks very non-approachable. And then even taking it a step further, as the women before me mentioned, in the South. And then even if you look deeper into some of the sororities, some of the colleges and things like that, especially in Black culture, there was a paper bag test. And, if you were a certain skin complexion, you could be a part of this organization, or you could be in this school, and then with others, not so much. And then even how it's trickling down today, when you look at the entertainment industry, hearing the stories about Viola Davis talking about how she has to work a little bit harder than some people who are a little bit fair skinned to solidify her roles, or to solidify her place in Hollywood. And on the other spectrum of some fair skinned actors and actresses and people in the entertainment industry mentioning that they have to fight harder to prove that they're Black enough. And then I think, and I'm not for sure if the intern that we had before, when she was talking about how when Rihanna launched her makeup line, how it was groundbreaking because she did not use actual words or colors or foods to describe skin color, but it was a number. And then she made a space for people who were very fair as well as people who were very dark. And that made people feel like that they belonged and that there were beauty products out there for them. So I don't want to take up too much time. I have a whole lot of words and I can talk a whole lot. I don't want to go too deep into this, but yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Chantal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well. I just want to say everybody look beautiful to start with. Good evening. I am Chantal Baseke, born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Left there when I was 15 and lived in Nashville, Tennessee for 22 years. So I did attend Hillsborough High School, a year and a half Austin P in Clarksville, a year and a half at Tennessee State. but I ended up graduating in Missouri. Um, I lived in Missouri for about 7.5 years, and now I'm up in the cold in Wisconsin, and I've been here for almost 6 years. I am a mother of three. I work in healthcare and interpreting, so I'm just so glad to be part of this. I've learned a lot so far. Was glad to meet Jacqueline in person about a few weeks ago. That was very awesome. And I hope to meet the rest of you some of these days. And is Niti, where in Australia are you?
I'm in Melbourne.
How far is that from Brisbane?
2 hours flight.
Oh, wow, that's far. But that-
Everything is pretty far in Australia. It takes a while to get anywhere.
I'm in Brisbane and in Perth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Perth's even further. That's about 3.5 hours away.
Well, see you someday. Good to see you.
Absolutely.
It's been a minute. I know she didn't even hear me. I love your hair.
I'm sorry, who?
Miss Tisdale.
Oh, Miss Tisdale. Oh,
Said it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Love your hair.
Thank you. I wear red. Okay.
Yeah,
we like it. We like it.
Tracy, also good to see you. I think it's my first time seeing Lydia and Nitty. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you for
Very nice.
joining us. Hello, Miss Zana Johnson. Is it Zana or Dana? You're on mute.
That's a long story, but I had to scream. Mwah. Good to see you, girl.
Okay, wait, I can't see. Everything's gone. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, here it is. I can't make it come back. I can't see you guys. Hey, darling. I'm sorry I can't see you guys. I love you. I can't see. There you are. Hey, my sister, my long-term sister. Hey,
Yes.
hi, Mama Fatia. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Oh my God, I'm good.
I haven't seen her in forever. So
It's been, I know, it's been too many years. I could
That's
hug you.
good.
I could hug you. I love you.
I
love you.
send a virtual hug. Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Same,
Wow.
my sister. Same.
Well, welcome for
Fatia,
coming in
I
and
love
joining
you.
us
I
this
love
evening.
Hey, Mama Fatia, how you doing?
I am good.
Oh
Welcome,
my God.
welcome. Thank you for
Thank
joining us
you.
this evening. We're just kind of introducing ourselves. We're at the tail end of our introductions. If you're interested in just giving us a little background, like where were you born? What's your background? Your cultural background?
Sure. I'm back in Tennessee, Chantal. Is it Giddy? I'm back in Tennessee. You know, and you know why I came here. I stayed. So I'm here, and let's see what else. So I've been in education for over 20 plus 30, I don't know, years anymore. I can keep count. And my field is Black Studies, woo woo Africana Studies. And I am a proud member of the sorority Delta Sigma Theta, which I, love that. And I live in Chicago, taught in Chicago for a long time now. I'm back in Tennessee, and that's a nice short summary for me.
Okay, well, thank you. Good to meet you. So just about everyone, if Mary or is it Gamala? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing.
Hi, good morning.
Hi,
I don't know whether
how
you
are
can hear me.
you?
I'm
Were
good,
you
I'm good.
interested in being one of our panelists as well, or were you just hanging out with us to listen in?
I'm hanging out with you to listen and to be part of this because I saw it in LinkedIn and I said, okay, I'll come in. So I just want to hang around today, but further on, I can contribute.
Okay, would you like to share where you are tuning in from?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am tuning in from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And it's a very emotional morning for all of us Malaysians, because yesterday we voted for change. For 61 years, Malaysia has had one government ruling us. And So it's a very emotional morning for all of us, including me. So about me, my name is Vimala. I was born in Malaysia. I'm a Tamil. I'm dark-skinned. I come from a poor family. So in Malaysia, B40 is a socioeconomically challenged environment, and that's where I grew up. But I got a chance to go to UK to train as a nurse. So I lived in UK for 30 years. I trained as a nurse in nursing management. And then my last corporate role was to look at equal opportunities. In those days, this is in the 90s, it was more about equal opportunities. So I worked in the health sector. And then I came home in 1997. I came back to Malaysia and didn't want to do anything to do with the corporate world. So I ran a kindergarten. And then I found out what coaching is all about. So I did my certification. So I'm a certified coach and a team coach at the moment. And that's what I do. Yeah, that's it. I am all about DEI, all about leadership development, all about women empowerment. It's not something I wanted to do as a coach. I'm happy to be coaching leaders to transform. I never wanted to step into EDI because it's exhausting, emotionally exhausting. So here we are talking about colorism. So I have just stepped into it. So where that will go, it'll be interesting because today we have hope of a new Malaysia. Malaysia is a Muslim country. The dominant group are Malays. Then we have the Chinese and the Indians. And discrimination, all of that has been, colorism has all been part of the, I can't even describe the word, has been what it has been. So yesterday we went out and voted for change. So that's me. That's me. Thank you.
Wow, you are very welcome. Thank you. I'm excited to have friends joining us from, around the world. I mean, literally, that is exciting. It's exciting, but it's sad in a sense because, colorism definitely, it goes beyond our particular circles, our spaces, and it's spanning across the globe. My first question I was going to ask everyone was to share an experience that impacted you. The topic of this evening is the impact of colorism on self-esteem. So I was going to ask, you all shared something already, but if you can think of something in particular that you can say, really left an impact on you. What was that? What was that something that happened to you or something you observed happening to someone else?
So I'm happy to share. So I guess I've, always been surrounded by the verbiage around fair skin versus dark skin. A child is born in Indian society or Indian community, and the first thing they kind of ask is, is the child fair? And you can see that there's a difference. If the response is yes, then they're like, oh, that's great. And if the response is no, then they're kind of like, oh well, so it kind of permeates from the time a child is born right through their life, right? And so, I very much grew up with that sort of language around staying out of the sun, around using whitening creams, around, you're less marriageable if you have darker skin, which for Indian community and Indian parents, they kind of have two objectives in life generally, particularly the older generations. One is to get you an education and the second one is to get you married, right? And so if you're less marriageable because of your skin, then that's a big deal because you're surrounded by this, this issue like left, right, center. But the one thing I guess I wanted to talk about, and it was it was what I posted about earlier this year, which is how Fathia and I met originally, was interestingly, I was watching Bridgerton earlier this year, which you may know has darker skinned Indian women in it, which is very unusual from a representation point of view on screen. And I'd watched it once, and I was watching it for the second time round. And as I was sitting there, I found myself having these really, really odd thoughts, right? And I was kind of disbelieving that the main actress was ending up with the guy, right, in my head. And the minute I was thinking that, I was like, what are you thinking? And why are you thinking that? And that's so stupid. And I was just like, what is going on in your mind? Like, so I was having this argument with myself in my head, and reflecting on that argument that I was having with myself at the time, I was like, oh my God, I think whilst I thought I had worked through all the issues around colorism, over the decades, and had moved past it, there were obviously still these deep-seated scars left behind from what I'd been told through childhood and through growing up, and what I'd seen around me and all the rest of it. And so it was a real moment of realization for me that actually these things last for a long time. Like, the scars go deep, and to a large extent, it's probably informed, I think, the way I've approached relationships over the years. It's definitely influenced my self-esteem, from a just a physical perspective, and believing that, I can attract people, if that makes sense, right? Like, similarly to what was going on in my head, I was like, well, that's just a reflection of what you think about yourself and what you've thought about yourself over the years, right? And so for me, that was actually a real wake-up moment of going, this is still an issue, even though I thought it wasn't an issue. And it made me realize just how impactful it was to see dark-skinned women on screen. And for me, particularly being from, I guess, an Indian background, seeing dark-skinned Indian women on screen, just because obviously that is, how I see myself being represented. And so it had a huge impact on me. And I thought, at the time, if only this is what we saw more often, then all these messages that are fed to kids, even now, right, because these messages still, so prevalent, if they saw themselves represented on screen, whatever it is, the big screen, the TV screen, etc., they saw themselves in books, they saw themselves in sport, they saw themselves in politics, they saw themselves in all the places, in boardrooms, in all the places that matter. Perhaps these issues wouldn't have the opportunity to take hold quite as deeply as they did for me. So that's what I wanted to share as a reflection.
Yeah, I get that very much so. I remember growing up, not that I had anyone that really mistreated me or anything like that, or was negative toward me because of my complexion, but from observing how others were treated, especially the favoritism of someone who was fairer complexioned. There's a big thing in our part of New York City. If you were Puerto Rican, if you were part Puerto Rican, if you were just light skinned, if your hair was wavy, if your hair was straight, if your hair was long, you got, like you were a goddess type of thing. And I just remember feeling like I was so dark. I thought I was dark, for the longest time, until one of my uncles once told me I was the color of a copper penny. I was like, really? So I had to put a penny on me and see, am I really that complexion or what? But it did not occur to me that I was like kind of right in the middle. But just to see how others are treated when they're either favored or they're not favored, it really can impact even someone who's not directly affected by it, but it can impact you just because you're witnessing how others are being treated, and you might fall in the middle of there some kind of way. So it's very interesting, that whole dynamic of, you know, when you mentioned about the, you know, don't go out in the sun and all that sort of thing. And I've heard that. I've heard other people being told that. Even a family member of mine who is a little browner than me, and then she's so self-conscious of getting a tan, and her complexion is beautiful anyway, but she's so self-conscious of it because she's like, I'm going to get too dark. You're fine. You know what I mean? But okay, enough for me. I want to hear from the rest of you. Who else has something to share about, you know, an experience that you've had that really impacted your self-esteem?
I can jump in. So I actually have two different ones, and I won't go so deep, so it won't take up that much time. But for me, it's a little bit difficult because this is also tied to, like, you know, like parenting issues and like my father, and unpacking this part of it. So I look exactly like my mother. My mother is very fair skinned and she has hazel eyes. And, you know, we identify as Black folks in the US. And when I was born, my father said that I could not possibly be his child because I looked like I was a white baby, right? But I look exactly like my mother. Those are his issues, and that's his stuff. And so he chose not to, you know, be a parent. But it also brings to mind, you know, and because of that, you know, like I didn't grow up with my biological father, who was brown skinned, by the way. And I have a half sister, and we're 6 months apart. And my half sister, who also looks exactly like her mother, is very dark skinned. And I, of course, didn't grow up with my father and not really knowing like my siblings. I knew of my half siblings, but I didn't grow up with them. And I didn't meet my half sister until I think I was like in my early 20s. And at the time I was dating a guy, and he asked me, and I had mentioned that I'd finally met my half sister and things like that. And he asked me, what does your half sister look like? And so I described her, you know, like she has dark complexion and things like that. And his remark to me was, oh, you're prettier than her. And it stunned me because I didn't show him a picture. There was nothing about what I said that you wouldn't have known like how beautiful my sister is. You know, like you just assume that she wasn't because I'm lighter, right? And being in even in dating situations where guys have said, well, the only reason why I'm dating you is because you're lighter. You know, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you stupid? Like, why? You know, and that kind of reinforces, you know, this this disconnection between us. And so for me, when I think about colorism, one, I, you know, I'm a little bit of a, like, I'm a like an academic. So I'm always thinking like, well, what does this word actually mean? Right. And so colorism is a practice of discrimination by which those with lighter skin are treated more favorably than those with darker skin. And this practice is a product of racism, colonialism, right? We see this as, you know, colorism as these legacies of imperialism and white supremacy across the globe, right? And how that is, and it upholds white standards of beauty and benefits white people and institutions of oppression that spans the globe of media It spans how we choose our partners, our quote unquote preferences. It is deep into how we think about our hair and who we are as people and our value and our worth. And so I think all of these things are meant to sort of separate us and have shame about who we are as people and our bodies. And for a while, for me personally, how it has impacted me is it has made me more aware and conscious of the ways in which I could be privileged over my, my sisterin, and when I say sisterin, I mean that even in non-gender conforming and other kinds of ways, femme, ways, all the folks that in ways that I'm privileged because of my complexion and because of that history within that. And for me, for some folks that are lighter skinned, their history is not necessarily tied to, or the skin color or the colorism is not tied to like, slavery, but my ancestors were enslaved. And so I often think about like, there was a New York Times op-ed, I can't remember the woman's name, but I can Google it and find it and throw it in the chat. But the first sentence that she has is that I have raped colored skin, and those legacies and history about that within the complexion, for me being a Black woman from the South who have descendants of folks who were enslaved, right? And how that currently impacts me and that. And so I often think about these things as they're very rooted in systems of oppression, very rooted in white supremacist ideology and practices.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that definition also. I meant to do that at the beginning. And to add to that, where colorism is about lighter skinned persons being treated more favorably, is also darker skinned persons being treated less favorably. That said, let's see. Also, it makes me sad to hear that your father responded the way he did, and unfortunately, that's a very real response for a lot of people, that rejection, and it's sad. Even the social rejections, where so-and-so doesn't want to be friends or doesn't want to date this one because that one is too dark, you're too dark. I've heard that. I've had a cousin who only wanted a light-skinned girlfriend, a light-skinned wife, or a guy I knew in college who felt he had to marry only a white girl type of thing. But let's move on. Who else has something to share in regards to a personal experience that impacted your self-esteem?
Can I say something? Can I say something quickly?
Absolutely.
I didn't know if you could hear me. So I do have a biracial brother. My mother was married to a white French man. And, being from the Congo, in our culture, cousins are considered your brothers, let alone a half brother, half sister. We call each other brother and sister. So I experienced a totally different scenario with my brother's father, who we raised him the African way, because to me, he's my brother. I was responsible for teaching him, I guess, the African culture, African ways, which he mastered pretty well. So his father was not too happy with that. And he would tell my brother that those are not your brothers or sisters, they're your half brothers, they're your half sisters. And the worst experience we had was with my children. So when I moved from Tennessee to Missouri, we stayed with my mom for about maybe 6 months before I got my own place. And I remember one time it snowed so heavily. So he would make my brother walk through the front door, and he was making my kids walk through the back door, and I wasn't aware of it. So when I found out, I was like, why are you doing this? And his answer was because he can and they can't. But then one day I overheard him refer to my kids as Negroes. So things like that, for children is devastating. Although my brother is half Black, half white, in his eyes, because it was lighter, he had the privilege to walk through the front door and made my kids walk to the back door. So this is something that my children live with, that they will never forget. Although, years later, he apologized for, such conduct, but this is something you can never forget. So yeah, those are some of the things, color. My brother is Black, whether he looks fair-skinned than I am, in this society that we live in, he's Black. And I had to make him understand that. I'm like, no matter where you go, he will never put on a piece of paper that he's white, because he's not. So yeah, I feel everybody's experience.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Let's see, Jacqueline has a comment that she posted in the chat. And she says, the white standard of beauty was force-fed to us so much that it was woven into our identity, to our detriment, in her opinion, in her opinion, I can't say it, in her opinion. That's why conversations and organizations are so important. We are decolonizing our lives. White adjacent equals power in our society. Thank you, Jacqueline. Does anybody else have any personal experience or observations that you've made
Yes.
where, Lydia, you have something?
Yeah, I'd love to share. Yeah, something very common that my mother will say is she's very proud that, so her brother married a white woman, which is how we were able to migrate here. So he married a white woman, was able to come here and get citizenship, and then he sponsored his family one by one after he got citizenship. So my mother, when she had me, said, it's amazing that I have such a light-skinned child, and her child turned out darker. And the same, that white aunt who's a racist also said the same thing, was like, how is it possible that your child is more fair-skinned than my child, and I'm a white woman? As if it was like a competition, which is really not something you should be saying, and also extremely problematic. But I think the US is very, especially in the US, there is a strong sticking point on phenotype. So you have those kinds of people who are very obsessed with the phenotype, and that comes from a very long, well, the Nazis learned from people in the United States. So it comes from a deep Nazism, and before Nazism, that fascism and white supremacy. And I think that it picks up and internalizes in so many cultures. So I was speaking to a higher up in MNPS, and he's actually a Black man. And we were supposed to be speaking about Egyptian students in MNPS. So Arabic is the third most spoken language in Nashville. So there are thousands of students within the school system, and Metro Nashville Public Schools does not adequately meet the need of our students. So this was supposed to be like a really important meeting for him to take very seriously because he's not doing his job well. And so we met, and I had a laundry list of, you're very concerned with like white kids and Black kids, but there's a lot of kids in the middle of that in Nashville, and you're not seeing that. You're seeing the world in binaries, but there's a lot in the middle, sir. And so we were talking about language access. We were talking about what does it mean to be, to not be a citizen, That means I'm not able to apply for food stamps. How does that affect me? How can the school navigate that kind of median way for people for 5 years? Things like that. And he kind of interrupted me. I was kind of going through a laundry list of things that schools should be doing to meet the need of parents and students holistically, especially since he's coming in from a diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is your job to bring this up. And he was like, you know, you're not Egyptian though. Like, you're something else. And I was like, and I've heard this multiple times. So I was like, yeah, I don't know. I had a Lebanese great-great-grandmother. I don't know. Okay. But in Egyptian culture, because Egypt is so diverse, most Egyptians have Persian ancestry, Armenian and Greek, Nubian, Somali, any North African, Amazigh. Like, Egyptians don't see it that way so rigidly as in the United States, because obviously for a very, very long time in the United States, you had to be white for citizenship. Like, literally, you had to prove I am white in order to gain citizenship. So that's colorism enshrined in legal citizenship. And in the 1920s, when Syrians first came to the United States, they made the legal argument that they were white. So that way, there is no Middle East category, there is no Arab category. They legally fought to be white because of the treatment that they were receiving. There's a really good book about it, When Arabs Became White, by Sarah Gualtieri. So yeah, so to kind of stamp out their Black community members, they were like, this is the closest we're going to get to citizenship in order not to ruin ourselves. So it was really fascinating to me, because this is something I hear from a lot of people who've spent a lot of time in the United States, of like, you have to be one thing, choose your one thing. And there's such a rigid outlook of the world, instead of all of us are mixed, all of us are mixed. And I hope you're mixed, because if you're not mixed, that means for 5,000 years, your cousins have all been intermixing and you are very, very inbred. So he went on this rant and he was like, you know, because the sun touches Africa, and so you have to have melanin. And I was like, well, okay, if y'all can't tell, but I'm extremely hairy, which is what a lot of light-skinned people who live on the equator, they're hairy to also, you know, reflect the sun. And I was like, so that's really normal. If you go to that side of the world, I'm not an an abstract concept here. And he was like, well, you know, Egyptians and Black, and he went on this whole thing about like the hieroglyphs and the walls. And I was like, yes, please do explain my culture to me. Keep going. We love this conversation. And so at that point, I just kind of was like, you know, if you want to believe what you want to believe, instead of actually doing something for these kids, thank you. Instead of actually doing something for these kids, like, there are a lot of Arab kids in your school who think it's okay to say the N-word because they grow up around Black people. And so they have that image of like, I'm also Black, but they're not Black, and they need to know why. And the school system is not addressing that. You can be oppressed and not be Black. And you can also be oppressed and also oppress Black people. And a lot of Arabs participate in that. So these are discussions you need to be having in your schools. And instead you're wasting time about, you know, melanin and the hieroglyphs and 5,000 years ago. When in reality, we could be spending time actually discussing something with these kids and working against segregation, and against, you know, a segregation that's even worse than what was in Tennessee in the 1950s and 60s. It's significantly worse now, MNPS. So the last thing I will say is, what's really interesting about colorism is it's not only, you know, to the detriment of people of color, of how we see ourselves, but it's also, for me, I find it fascinating how colorism affects white people, and how they navigate through that. Because white people, like Kim Kardashian, she wants to be tan, and she wants to look like a Black woman, right? She wants this aesthetic of the body shape of a Black woman, the eyelashes of a Black woman, tanness of a Black woman. But she can also get out of that, right? As a white woman, she can go reverse. She can reduce that BBL. She can take off the lashes. She can uncurl that hair. And it was really fascinating to me because a lot of white people would also tell me, you know, you have really, really nice hair, and that's a privilege to you. And I'm like, that's a very interesting way to look at it, because I feel like my curly hair distinguishes me automatically, that people are like, that's a person of color, automatic. And I can treat her X, Y, and Z because she's not, she's not of the white people. But white people find that really pretty. Or even now when I go to my eyebrow person, I tell her leave my eyebrows thick because they love to butcher my eyebrows and make them thin, like was the fashion in the 90s and 80s, to make them super thin. And I'm like, no, the fashion now, surprisingly, as dictated by the white mainstream, is to have very thick eyebrows like women of color, is to have really bold eyelashes like women of color. It's gonna change, but right now, I would like to take my moment, since white women are taking this moment. And it's just a very fascinating mind glitch to feel like our beauty standards are always being dictated by white women. If they're gonna thin their eyebrows, we're all thinning our eyebrows. If they're gonna straighten their hair, we're gonna burn our hair to a crisp. And we're gonna move the way they move in society. Even though they want to be like us. They have tanning salons to be like us. They're now getting all their nails done in the long fashion, right? And it's now fashionable to get your nails done. So it's really wild. So that's what I'll end on.
We are on a plight to change the dynamic of what beauty is. Black and brown is where it's at. I'm just saying.
Can I go, please? Atia?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, I wish, I mean, I am so amazed. I'm glad I'm here, because hearing the diverse voices in this community is just, you know, I'm an older generation and I'm just reliving what I also went through. So very quickly, thank you for all of you to talk about this. So I'm one of 5 girls, and we all are dark, except that my younger sister, for somehow, is a little bit lighter than me. So even till today, I'm the darkest. Even till today, I look at her and I think, I don't know, I don't know what you're using on your face, because you look fairer than me. So this is that talk that goes on. Even, as I said, I'm an older woman. So, but among us, we never had an issue about being dark-skinned. But as Niti described and explained, the Tamil community, all that goes on. So as a child, I didn't know anything about me being different because of my skin color until I met, we went to Singapore to visit family, and the neighbor downstairs was kind of picking a fight with us. And then she said, I don't know whether my mother was there. She kind of said, oh, you've got girls who look like crows, meaning black. And I heard that, and I must have been about, I don't know, 7 or 8, but I just kind of went on along with that. Anyway, at age 19, I found myself in UK. And only about 3 years ago, I found out that my nickname was Midnight Blonde. I was vivacious, I had long hair, you know, all of that. At age 19, I left a family that is very traditional, a community which is very traditional. And I found myself in UK in 1967 Mick Jagger, Beatles, miniskirts, the whole works, you know. So we were all part of it. There were other girls from Malaysia there as well. So the nurses' home was very diverse. We had women, girls from all over the world. But I was kind of vivacious. I wanted to meet everybody. I wanted to talk to everybody. So because of that, and I had long hair, and I'm a Tamil girl, so straight long hair. And I didn't realize, because of this personality that I was portraying, that the white girls had the privilege to name me Midnight Blonde. Now, I didn't, as I said, I didn't know this until 3 years ago. I have a very good friend called Anne McLaughlin, who married an Indian guy, so she's Anne Shah, and we're great friends. And I was at her place, and she said to me, "Oh my God, Vimala, don't you know we called you Midnight Blonde?" And I just looked at her and I had to giggle, because I didn't know how else to describe, how else to react. But only lately I started processing what that is all about, because I've stepped into this whole thing about my color. I'm here. Colorism is an issue in Malaysia. And I've stepped into EDI and EDIB, because belonging is also an important aspect of us when we talk about self-esteem. So how did I deal? So my growing up in UK was me doing what I did and getting promoted, yeah, but I was self-sabotaging all the way. Although I had the capacity to be a sister, to be a nurse manager, all of that, I personally, I just kept self-sabotaging, because the self-esteem was never grounded. It never gets grounded. You know, I was listening to Michelle Obama. She's just brought out a book. And what she says is that fear and the doubt that we have, that we internalize, because what was said to us, and has how all of you are talking about, that for us to pierce through that, to be valued, it is hard work. And you know, all this, you know, the last speaker said, sorry, Lydia, I think Lydia, about how we are always following what white women determine for us. Now that for me is so powerful, you know. Thank you, Lydia, for saying that, because that's how society and culture and our own community, our parents, schooling, that's how it disempowers us all the way through. So yeah, I'm learning. My self-esteem is still, I'm a work in progress. Truly, I'm work in progress. Even when I became a coach, because I had to coach people with issues, the agenda they bring to the table. And I said to myself, I need to go and do some work on me in order for me to be resourceful for people who are in front of me. Okay, it's leadership, but nevertheless, so I did some work on me. I did have therapy. It did help, but it still doesn't, you know. I'm work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This conversation, you know, can go really, really deep and gets very in depth. And it's something that, you know, it's not going to be a one-time only conversation that we have amongst ourselves. We definitely will continue this conversation. I wanted to try to keep this down to no more than an hour and a half. So we have about 30 minutes left, but I do want to hear from more of you. If anybody else was interested in sharing, Vimala, is that correct?
Yes, it's Vimala, like in
Vimala,
Pamela.
Vimala.
Thank you.
You mentioned the name calling, you mentioned the name calling. Who else was it that mentioned the name that you were called? Jacqueline also mentioned being labeled with a name, being teased as a child for her skin color. And let me tell you, if you see her in person, personally, I just have to tell you, she has one of the most beautiful complexions. I told her one time she had on a sundress, and I was like, and no offense to this, I was like, your skin looks like melted chocolate. I want to lick you. But her skin is so beautiful. And I don't mean anything by that. I am straight, I'm just saying. But her skin is gorgeous. But she was titled Blackie Jackie. So what does that do to someone when you're titled with these names like that? And so on that end of the self-esteem factor, I'm curious, has anybody else been targeted with names that were like that, whether you're on the lighter spectrum or the darker spectrum, or you're in the middle? Were there names attached to you that were hurtful to you, that impacted you? Anyone?
I would comment and say that I was not given like a name, but I remember being told, like I was about 12, that it was like, okay, well, you're gonna have to lose weight because you can't be dark skinned, have short hair, and be plus size at the same time. That's like a triple negative. And it was like, okay, so you're gonna have to buy some hair or you're gonna have to lose some weight, because those are your options right now. So I remember being told that as a young girl, and through my adulthood, I've heard a lot of young girls being told the same thing. Or one of my cousins, and to me, she's not dark. She will be considered, for me, she will be fair skinned, or she will be caramel skin, brown skin, or whatever. But she mentioned that she used to hate when people would tell her that she's pretty for a dark skinned girl. And she was just, and even with her daughters now, someone said that and she snapped all the way out. She was like, no, my baby is beautiful, period. But people will say that. People will say that you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl. And then I've recently heard someone who was fair-skinned said that they were told the same thing. You're pretty for a light-skinned person, or you have light-skin problems type thing. And it's like, we have to recognize and see that colorism is a way of separating the masses. Because if we were to not focus on color and skin tone, think about the power that we will have in order to do other things, or to put that energy towards something else. And even looking at the self-esteem, when you look at the media on how like the beauty, the industry is $1 billion industry, multi-billion dollars. When you're talking about hair, when you're talking about makeup, when you're talking about injections, Botox, Olivale, forever has been trying to tighten somebody's skin. It's like the beauty industry, just off of creating a box with the standard of beauty in it and saying, well, this is what you have to be in order for you to be beautiful. And the truth of the matter is, everybody is being told that there's something about you that's not. Well, who said that you know what perfection is? And then we also need to start, for all of the experiences that we had with the name calling, who's the source? Who are you to say to me, I'm too dark, or I'm too fair, or I'm beautiful, I'm not beautiful? Even if they give you a compliment and say, well, you're pretty, why am I pretty? What's pretty about me? That's a compliment, but are you saying that only because I'm fair skinned? What is it about me that is pretty? What is it about me that you are attracted to? Because if you are attracted to me only because I have a friend and the group of friends that hang around him, we joke to him, but we always tell him that he was like, I would never marry a white woman, but every woman that he married is like Mariah Carey. She's very fair skinned with blonde hair, like every single one. So you may not have a type, but you have a type. And why? So we have to start changing the narrative to this. We have to start telling little girls, like, you're beautiful regardless, not to tear someone down because they're dark or light, but we have to change the narrative for our children, period, across the globe, because there are a whole lot of hurt little girls, and we do not want them to keep repeating the cycle of the things that we have been experiencing. So what can we do to put out there and say, I was looking at, and it's not necessarily colorism, but it's talking about changing the standard of beauty, where the singer Pink, and she said that her daughter looked at her and she was like, I want to be like that little girl because she's pretty. She says, well, why you don't think you're pretty? And she was like, they say I look like a little boy. She was like, what do you think I look like? My hair is shaved. Does mommy look like a boy? She was like, no. Well, how do you think mommy looks? She was like, well, you look beautiful. She says, you are too. And you can do anything. We have to instill that. And it's not going to be a one time of you're a pretty little girl. It's going to be, we have to start doing things to tell our young girls and young boys, because I know men and have conversations with a very dear friend of mine just yesterday, where he feels like there's a barrier in corporate America because of his skin color and because of his hair. He was told, well, if you have locks, you will never progress in corporate America. But then again, you're told if you have braids, you can, or if you have this, or you have to, and at the absolute, who made up that rule?
And that's the thing. Also, who is establishing that? Who's setting that standard?
And we have to break it. We have to break it. We need to kill it, tear it up, throw it out the window, do whatever we need to do just across the globe and change the narrative, because somebody created it and we need to destroy it. Okay.
And it usually is because of someone else's discomfort. Yep. I want to greet Miss Brenda and Bruce. Hello and welcome, and thank you for coming in. Did either of you want to share anything? Perhaps not, or maybe later.
Brenda she posted something in the chat.
Did she? Okay, let's see.
About her daughter.
Am I missing it?
It's under, she sent it directly to me, so I just reposted it. And so it might say Tracy from Tracy, but it's actually from Brenda. It's like one of the longer posts towards the end of the chat.
Hello all. That one? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, so she says, yes, this has been going on since time began. My daughter questioned me, why do people favor one of my daughters because one is dark skinned and the other one is fair skinned, doing the same routine, but people always recognize her fair skinned daughter and not the dark skinned one. She didn't understand why people are like this, and she felt bad for her because she noticed and sees this. She questions her mom and asked, she says, I see what is going on with me is because of my skin. So she feels like some people don't care for her. So her mom has to explain these things to her. She said, you have people in this life like this, but you are beautiful. You are a beautiful dark-skinned child. Don't let people bring you down because of their ignorance. Amen to that. Amen to that. I too have a beautiful dark brown daughter, and she came out looking exactly as I hoped she would. Her dad is a beautiful dark-skinned gentleman, and I just wanted a beautiful dark-skinned child, and she's gorgeous. But somewhere, and I don't know where it came from, she has this thing with calling herself ugly, and it just hurts me to my core, because I'm like, where are you getting this from? You certainly don't get it from here or from us. You know, your family's not picking on you. Your family's not, you know, putting you down because of your complexion. And she's not that much, you know, in social circles where she should be picked on because of her skin complexion. But I mean, it's a very real thing that even our children are struggling with this image thing. So as Latoya said, and I did want to also to end with that, you know, what do we do with our children? Needy has had situations where her daughter as well, you know, having the struggles with her complexion and questioning, why is she not lighter? Why is she not white? Is that correct? But
Yeah,
also,
that's correct. So the first time my daughter said something, she was 6, and she came home from school one day and she said to me, "Mummy, I don't like being brown." I said, you know, my immediate instinct was someone said something to her. And so I was like, why did someone say something to you? And she said, no, just don't like being brown. You know, don't like my brown knees. I don't like that they, you know, get a bit drier and flakier. And, you know, she didn't use that language, but that was kind of where she was going, you know. And I think she did say that someone had said something about her lips being darker. And so sometimes, you know, kids can make comments that aren't necessarily directly related to skin color, but kind of go to the different features that darker skinned kids might have because they're different, right? And, you know, I mean, she goes to a school where she's surrounded by, you know, quite a variety of, you know, children. Like there are a lot of kids from Asian, Southeast Asian countries as well. There are a few darker skinned kids as well. So it's, you know, it was interesting for me because I was like, I didn't know that this would happen with her because it was different when I was growing up. Like I grew up, you know, here in the 80s, 90s, and I was the only dark-skinned kid in my year level, let alone probably in like 2-3 year levels, right? So I felt very different, and I, you know, that was a big issue for me, but I was surprised that it came up for her. And it was interesting for me because my first reaction to her was to tell her, no, you're beautiful, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And actually, when I thought about it later on at night, I went, do you know what? If someone had said that to me back when I was going through this, it wouldn't have resonated because I didn't necessarily believe it, right? And so I actually, the next time she raised it with me, because she raised it again, I actually just sat there and I said to her, I get it. Look, I understand. I get where you're coming from. I hear you. You know, it's okay to feel the way you feel. However, you know, you will love your skin at a point in time. I can tell you that you are beautiful and you will love your skin at a point in time. Okay. And so it was more about kind of sitting with her and acknowledging where she was at and going and validating it rather than brushing it away. Because, you know, I mean, I've got that in posts that I've written about colorism, a lot of people write back and go, yeah, but you're so beautiful. And I'm like, you know, you saying that to me means nothing. You know, like I'm not writing this so that you can turn around to me and say you're beautiful. Like it's just irrelevant. And telling me that skin color is irrelevant is also wrong on so many levels, right? Because your skin color defines the experience that you have, right? And as you know, Lydia and Tracy have said, I think earlier, from either end of the spectrum, right? You know, it does define the experience that you have. So I'm sure my sister, who's a bit fairer than I, had a very different experience growing up, but, you know, probably has other things that have scarred her relating to things like colorism, but from a very different perspective. And so for me, I think, you know, with kids, it's important, I believe, to validate their feelings and to sit with them through that, but to equally then try and expose them to different perspectives. And so when we started having those conversations, I was like, right, I'm going to go buy some books. We're going to read some stuff together that kind of gets her used to thinking there's difference everywhere, you know. It was interesting. One time she came home and what happened? She was wearing a green color t-shirt to school. It was school photos day. I'd forgotten in the morning. So she was wearing her sports color t-shirt, house t-shirt, as opposed to her normal red t-shirt. And she came back and she said to me, one of the kids, she was really upset. And she said, one of the kids, like, you know, told me I'd ruined the photo because I was wearing a different t-shirt. And I said to her, okay. I think it, you know, makes you stand out, right? And then we had this conversation where I was like, when have you felt like this before? Because you've told me something like this before. And she recognized it was when she told me that she didn't like her brown skin, you know. And so we've had these conversations quite a few times. I'm just trying to reinforce to her that it's, you know, it's okay. You can be different. Other people have other differences. Some people may not speak English as well. They may find that is uncomfortable for them, right? And that might be their difference that they're a little bit sensitive about. Other people might be really tall. That might be an issue for them. Other people might be XYZ. You know, everyone's got something that they might have as an issue. And so for me, it's about having those conversations equally, ensuring that if someone in the broader community says something to her or around her, that we have a conversation about it. And we go, okay, you know, this is where this is coming from. And I think for the, I said that I think we had this conversation over social media the other day around shame and shaming, you know, our parents' generation and people like that who might have some of these views and hold some of these views. And for me, I've kind of realized recently, you know, shame is not useful in those conversations. You know, I don't want to shame anyone for holding these views or for, you know, having drunk the Kool-Aid, let's say, you know, because they grew up in an era where this was normal and this was the way people thought, right? And so it's so deeply internalized for them that often I think they think that they're doing right by their kids when they're like, stay out of the sun, you know, use these creams because you want to get married, you want to go on and have kids and have this great life. And so we're doing this for you because we care, right? And I think, honestly, I actually think people believe that, you know, and I think sometimes they don't realize that they're causing hurt in these conversations. So for me, it's like, okay, if you're surrounded by these conversations, if this comes up, I'm going to have a conversation with my daughter and go, this is why that was wrong, right? Let's talk about it. Let's get it out in the open and let's have that conversation.
Thank you for that. Gosh, I want to get into so much more of this. You know, we'll be on here for another 2 hours, but we are going to have a part 2 and a part 3 and maybe more beyond that. So December, you know, on a flyer, if you've seen a flyer, we do have a date for December. We have a date for January. So please keep that in mind. We want to broaden the audience. We need some other perspectives in here, you know, get some men in here to talk also, expand upon other continents as well. Oh gosh, I wanted to end with asking, you know, your thoughts on how do we change the mindsets that are behind colorism behaviors and attitudes. But before we do that, in our last few minutes, I want to acknowledge that Jacqueline had her hand up. So floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your patience with all my internet stuff. Niti, did I pronounce your name right? Niti? I want to make sure I did say it right. I appreciate everything that you just said. It's literally, you know, where my heart was, and I would add to what she was saying, solutions. In my perspective, I realized that the more an individual has an opportunity to see outside of what they know, exposure, travel, for children especially, getting them out to see the world that is like them and the world of difference. And having the conversations while you are in spaces that are different to give them an opportunity to be curious without judgment. Children are curious in general, right? But if they're taught right when they are being curious that we embrace difference. We don't shun difference. Difference doesn't mean fear. Different doesn't mean anything bad, right? As we know, the children are the ones that will become the adults of the next generation. So in my perspective, you know, exposure, and that's specifically for children. But I can't say that adults can't learn from exposure as well, you know. But the campaigns that are existing now around the world is getting the picture, and I think the world is getting the picture because we, as a global majority, have decided that we are better together than separate. The unifying of the global majority, in my perspective, can add to the persuasion of the individuals that hold the keys to what's the propaganda around the world, like Band-Aid. Like, we know, we see Band-Aids that are our color now. It's because we decided to come together. And when I say we, not just the global majority, but to align with the allies that have the resources and that have the seats at the table. So I feel as though alignment with allies that are at the table and have a seat next to them to say, come on to the table, so that we can make these decisions together. Again, we all live in this society. We've all experienced what colorism or white racist thought, the recipients of those things, we've experienced it. But we're all here on the planet together as Earthlings. So I realize that I know there's a difference, and it's going to come from first us unifying, but then us unifying as just people, deciding that this is not the rhetoric and the narrative that we want to continue, and we have to be strategic about it. But exposure was one of my number one suggestions, because if you stay in the little circle that you're in, you know, children, adolescents, adults, you won't know what's out there, and you won't even have an appreciation for it because you don't see the value.
Very true. Very true. Tracy?
So really quickly, I'm a big sort of nerd around like books and resources. So I dropped a bunch of things in the chat. So if you guys want to share that, but I think in my other sister circle group that we're also having these conversations around, part of this is sort of doing a lot of the process of unlearning. And unlearning for ourselves, and kind of saying like, wait a minute, like all of these things that I have been placed on me, have been placed on society, and who benefits from me thinking in this way? Who ultimately benefits? What systems of oppression benefit from us thinking, about our hair, and hair discrimination is also like known as texturism. So having different types of hair, or thinking in those ways. And I think for us, in our movement work, and even and how this touches like our housing movement work, because I work with a bunch of activists in the housing justice movement. How does like colorism impact or body shame impact our work in housing justice? And so for us, we've been kind of diving into A Body Is Not an Apology. The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor as a vehicle to have these discussions, and to really do that. But I think having forums like this, where our global community can come together and talk about these issues, and see, I think that's also one way or a solution for us to have that, for us to understand like how this issue of colorism not only just impacts us in the US, it impacts us in, South Asia, in Australia, in Malaysia. I also have a colleague that does colorism work, and from immigrants from Vietnam, right? So, this is such a wide sort of spread issue, and it has its legacies in imperialism and colonialism, British imperialism, white American settler colonialism in the US. And it still is something that we feel in our everyday lives. But I think having these conversations, sharing our stories is one way that we can combat it.
Thank you. Definitely agree with you on that. Ms. Zaina.
See me. Oh, sorry, I'm muted. So I know you said you wanted to finish this thought, so I won't say much quickly. I wanted to say the following two things. I've experienced the opposite, and I'm gonna say this two ways. I got family in Brooklyn from the Caribbean, and my sister had twins. The first twin, well, two twins, two children, and they're exactly opposite. One is short and light, one is dark and tall. When they were first born, we had like a lovely little party, and in the room, everyone's my complexion, and so this is light-skinned child who, of course, when she was born, looked much more like a white child, and they were playing favorites with the brown skin. I heard someone even say something, they called her a brownie and how beautiful she was. She's an infant, and they're favoring the darker child at that point. And so I've had that experience, and I've also been told that I was too light to date someone because as brown as I am, I wasn't as dark as the family. So that was my experience. And so not that I wasn't, but I was old by that. I was old enough to be traumatized. I'm not traumatized by that. But I will say that as a result of my experiences as a brown skinned woman, I tend not to focus on looks at all when I talk to young children. I tend to focus on, oh my God, you look so smart. Oh my goodness, you look so intelligent. You look like you're going to be a wonderful engineer. You want to, I do that. I basically don't talk about looks at all because I think that if we talk about looks, it's where we saw the slippery slope of color, because we talk about phenotypes of how we look, and how we look isn't even who we are. So that's my small contribution just to the whole color conversation for tonight. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that about, acknowledging intelligence, acknowledging talent rather than acknowledging features. I like that. Let's see. So we are at 9:02 Central Time. Niti, what time is it where you are?
It is 2:00 in the afternoon. I was just writing a message, actually. I'm gonna have to run because I have to take my daughter swimming.
Okay, no
Actually.
problem. So, gosh, thank you all so much. Thank you. Like I said, this conversation can go on just amongst us. It needs to go on. I hope you will come back again. I hope we can stay in touch. Let's see, there's definitely more coming. So our next one is going to be December 10th or 11th if you're in Australia. And then in January, end of January, during 28th and 29th, we're going to do this again. We can communicate. I hope we have everyone's email address. If we don't have your email address, please drop it in the chat so we can reach out to you. And gosh, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being a part of this. It's important to hear each other's stories, as it was just mentioned, and to share in that compassion toward each other. Everybody's experiences are different, but it's a shared experience in itself. So if anybody has anything else to share before we sign off. Anything? No?
Just a big thank you to you for hosting the conversation, and it's been a beautiful space, and I think everyone's felt incredibly comfortable sharing their stories. So thank you for creating this space, and thank you, as I said in my message in the chat, to everyone who was here just for holding space for each other's stories, which I think is so important with conversations around issues like colorism, which can be quite difficult and quite sensitive. So thank you to everyone who attended, whether or not you spoke or you were just here to listen. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we're all holding space for each other in the room.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
And we will post this video. So it'll be posted on our YouTube channel. I can share the link with you as long as we have your email address. And again, like I said, hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you all and have a wonderful night or day, depending on where you are.
Thank you.